My name is Jennifer Baker, and I am one of your legislative advocates. I work with Dave Causing Trouble up in Sacramento, and I really look forward to the time when I'm going to be able to meet you in person. But until then, I wanted to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us this morning for our 2021 Virtual Advocacy Day workshop. What we're going to cover this morning are a few different items. And we're going to first go over the CalRTA website, which is just being updated with quite a bit of new information with all the materials you're going to need for our virtual advocacy days. We're going to go over reference materials that our GRC representatives have that they're going to be sharing with our representatives' offices and background materials for you. We're going to be going over some send ahead materials, and we'll talk about what that means later in the workshop. And finally, a virtual toolkit. After we finish that, we're going to do some role play. So you'll be able to have the opportunity to meet Congressmember Joyce Riddle later in the workshop. And then we'll follow up with the Q&A that we haven't had a chance to get to. So with that, there were a few issues that we wanted to cover first, and that's the schedule of events, which is very ambitious. But anyone that knows Susie knows that she is very good at putting together an ambitious schedule and making it happen. And so as you can see, we are right in the middle of our schedule to kick off our virtual advocacy days that are going to be taking place the week of March through 5th and the week of March 8th. Well, so we have already put together a number of other presentations. We did 2 advocacy day trainings yesterday, and we're able to answer all of the questions that our members were posing and help them to understand how this new and exciting process, doing things virtually, are going to take place. And ultimately, all of these activities are going to accumulate with our actual advocacy meetings that are taking place in March. What we did want to know is that obviously it's very different meeting virtually than it is meeting in Washington, D.C., as so many of you may be familiar with. There are communication differences from meeting on Zoom, or, you know, it's different than when you meet in person with an actual representative or their staff member. There are so many differences, but there are also new opportunities arising as we're able to actually bring more of you into the meetings and have more people participate. So we're looking forward to the new opportunities that are going to be out there and to see where they're going to go. So with that, Susie, I will turn it over to you.
Actually, David.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you, Jennifer. This is Dave Walrath. Thank you all for participating in this training. We will be going through a variety of issues and topics, and we will repeat ourselves. And we'll do that because some of these things we want to make sure you understand because they will be very important. Repetition, repetition, repetition. We will be doing that. So what is virtual advocacy? It is through video, email, through phone. We are not talking about letters because letters can be held up in the screening process in the Capitol for up to 3, 4, 5 weeks. The postcards, on the other hand, are not held up the same way. So video. Video to us is the primary means for virtual advocacy because it is face-to-face. It creates a connection. It shows that there is the opportunity to ask questions back and forth. Very difficult to do through email, very difficult to do over the phone. But a virtual through video, like this Zoom or a Teams or a Microsoft, any of the other platforms, provides a connection, a human connection. And when you message, you want to be able to have that type of connection. Emails are important because they're so easy to follow up. You don't have to schedule another Zoom. You can just respond to the email and have that as a back and forth. Not as good as face-to-face. Hard to say no to somebody you're looking at. Easier to not read an email. But once you have the email, they are read. The members of Congress may not be all that great at reading their emails, but their staff are really good at reading emails. And then phone calls. Phone calls also, like a video, give the human connection. While it's only voice, voice is important. As we've been saying before, our calls, our emails make a difference, and Susie can talk about that. You all know how many co-sponsors we received for HR 141 last year because of just the emails and the phone calls. Then we had more by video meetings as well. So all of these are types of variations in virtual advocacy. The next slide. So we will be creating, as Jennifer said, from March 1 through 5, advocacy days in Washington, D.C., without us being actually in Washington, D.C. The Government Relations Committee representatives will be making the appointments with the offices. We will not be asking for the divisions to do that. That is so we can have a better ability to not have overlapping schedules. Unlike our usual advocacy day, which is just one day, and in DC, where divisions will make the appointments because everything's going to happen that one day. Now there's an option to the legislative offices for any of the 5 days. And in fact, if they want to meet earlier than March 1, great. If they want to meet later than March 5, great. It is flexible that way because you will not need to travel to DC, get a hotel. So it is because of all that variability in when the meetings might occur, it is easier to keep track of that by the GRC representatives so we can have a whole, so we know who is meeting with whom when in order to have those presentations. You'll be receiving the information. There will be, for the first time, instead of a leave behind, a going forward packet, but these will be the lead contacts and what they'll do. After the appointment is set, we hope everybody on this line will join in. The lead person who made the appointment will be reaching out to the area director, division president, division government relations, legislative chair, in order to ask them to participate in the call in giving you the call link information. So that is the structure we are using this year, a little bit different than in the past, but one that we think will help ensure that the offices will not have 5 or 6 different phone calls and being asked to set up 5 or 6 different Zoom or Teams or whatever advocacy day. Next slide, please.
Thank you, David. And as David said, we're trying to make this as organized and easy for all of our members. We have a unique opportunity to have a large number of our members participating in our virtual advocacy because we don't need to make a point, of travel arrangements, hotels. It's not cost prohibitive anymore. So we're hoping, as David and Jennifer said, please be ready to receive that information from your GRC lead. There are 3 separate packets that we're trying to develop. They are folders now on the website. One will be for the GRC representative or lead, and that will include the same materials you'll be able to access on the website by the end of this week. But also for the lead, they'll have the meeting email request. We came up with a simple template that they could use. They will also have a March Advocacy Day checklist they've received to kind of keep ourselves on task. What do we need to do? It's the middle of March or the middle of April right now. What should I have done by then? And also at the end, the lead has to do the follow-up. They need to send it to Jennifer Baker this year so we can kind of backtrack and say, well, that representative said they had already co-sponsored. They're not on congress.gov. They committed to co-sponsor. We need to follow up with them. One of the biggest things before your video meeting, we recommend you know your legislator. If it's Mike Levin, go to his website, find out what committees he's on. What has he done in the past? What was their previous career? Were they on a PTA board? Were they on a school board? These are really important facts that you can bring up in a seamless way to make a connection with the representative. The committees are key. We have members who are from California who are on the Social Security Subcommittee and Education committees who will be making those key decisions for some of our advocacy needs. Were they a past sponsor of HR 141? You can find that on congress.gov. If you're having difficulty, just email me, tell me what representative you would like to know. As of this time, our new bill is HR 82. Again, it was sponsored by Rodney Davis from Illinois. As of today, there are 53 co-sponsors, only 10 from California. But we know that a lot of them will jump in and co-sponsor when they're reminded over and over from those legislative alerts. One of the key statistics that we're going to be providing you on the website, on the Virtual Advocacy Day link, will be from CalSTRS. They're completing the updated numbers that show how many people, current teachers and retired teachers, live in that representative's area. Those are voters, and we really find this to be a powerful tool to show them the large number. The other thing is your GRC rep or David or Jennifer or I will be making sure you do not hold your video meeting alone. You want to have at least five members to break up the speaking points. You want to try to do a little role playing yourselves, as you'll see today that we're going to be showing you. Do your homework. Look at those materials. They will be on the website by tomorrow under the advocacy action section, and also the separate section that is called 2021 March Virtual Advocacy Days. If you're not comfortable in a meeting and you just want to observe and be a guest, you could be the note taker. You could record any questions. The other thing, as I showed at the beginning, is make sure your setting is set up to gallery view. Ask permission before you take a screenshot. We'd love to be able to collect a number of screenshots to put on our website, but it is important that we do get permission from our elected officials before we do that. And then during your video call, really important that you go through all of these steps, and David's going to go through and follow through on which ones and how we divide those up.
Thank you, Susie. And I'll remember to hit my video and mute button a little bit faster.
Okay.
So during the call, the members and the staff probably do not remember who CalRTA is. So start with your name and an introduction and the people who are with you. and then immediately explain who CalRTA is, what the association does, and then move to the purpose of the meeting. One of the things you will be to explain to them what we're asking for and the reason. We have talking points, and that'll be discussed by Jennifer a little bit later on. Do not assume that the legislator or the staff people know our issues. They're dealing with a lot of different issues all the time, be it water, health, post-secondary education, national defense. They have so many more issues that they cannot remember every issue by every organization. So assume they do not know and start the conversation, but keep it simple. The send ahead package, they'll be discussed in more detail later, will give them the type of detailed information they need. So you can refer to that package, but keep it simple. Also avoid jargon or abbreviations. When you say CalRTA, don't say CalRTA. Start with California Retired Teachers Association, also referred to as CalRTA. Do not say WEP or GPO or other types of jargon. Spell it, say it out. Windfall elimination provision, one of the penalties in Social Security. Government pension offset, another penalty on Social Security. Our special education or healthcare on some of the issues of healthcare. Do not say ACA. If you're going to talk about the Affordable Care Act, start with Affordable Care Act. Avoid jargon, avoid abbreviations. They may have a different understanding. You might say CTA. Well, they might think CTA is California Trucking Association. Spell it out. Then as you provide the information, make it human, make it personal, put a face on the issue. And don't simply give them a handout on the personal information, because that will be part of the, go ahead, don't trust that. Talk about how it affects you or affects a friend of yours, another member of CalRTA. And we'll go over that when we do the final part of the role playing. And always be polite. Seldomly will a legislator or the staff be impolite. They're almost always polite. We should always be polite, even if for some reason they had a bad day and they're grumpy and they are a little abrupt. Stay on message, stay being polite. Legislators have their own issues. They will try to bring you into their issues. Stay on, be polite, but bring them back to our message. They are human. They're like us in many ways, different in many ways too, but they're human. They're people. Don't become flustered. Jennifer will talk about some of the things you should do in order to avoid being flustered. But think of them as one of your students who may not have been the brightest in the class, but who you really liked because you thought they could be a good person. Do not become awestruck simply because you're talking to a member of Congress. Then there'll be key facts, bring them up. Susie talked about if the representative is a member of a key committee. For us, that's in Ways and Means in the House, Commerce in the House, Education and Labor. In the Senate, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, and Senate Finance. Those are the key committees. Don't write this down. Don't worry about it. You can pick it up later in other parts. Co-sponsor, not co-sponsor, as Susie said, get to know some facts about the legislator to build the personal connection. Oh, I understand. You're a school board member. What was your district? What were your major issues? And so we're so happy that we have an educator who is a member of Congress. Try to bring it back to things that work. And then when you make the ask, please co-sponsor. Please do this, please do that. Then it's easier. You have a bit of a connection. You have to be clear. Also, you only probably have about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, maybe 20. If you have more than that, it's amazing. So be focused on your presentation. Next slide. And this is a quick checklist for meeting with the legislators. Once again, we've touched on almost all of this on the packets, the go-ahead, conference call, get to know ahead of time. Team collaboration. Please, once the date is set, once the time is set, the people who will have speaking roles, and we'll go through the type who has and should have what responsibilities as general topic, not specific names. Please get together and have a meeting ahead of time. When we were in person in DC, we would do that easily. Now we probably have to have a conference call or a Zoom meeting or something similar. So everybody knows their role and what they will be doing in the meeting. So with that, next slide. The suggested assignments. GRC representative will have created the meeting, so they are the ones who should introduce and like that. Then individuals, and it all depends upon how many people will be on the call and how many people are comfortable. But if you have enough people, have one who has been affected by the WEP to talk about that. If a person's been affected by the GPO, talk about that. Then Social Security, one of our topics. Medicare and Medicaid, one of our topics. Public schools, probably be focused on special education funding. Have one individual do those presentations. And then you should have somebody doing a recorder. If there's a question asked, if we have to follow up, a timekeeper. So you keep on schedule. And then those who will not be doing a formal presentation or the other assignments, the guests, please stay engaged, stay involved. It is important that everybody is part of it, which is why when you have the formatting screen and all people can be seen, it's important to be there. And if anything comes up where you want to make a comment, wait till the end. After all the presentations are done, then make the comment. Stay focused on the topics. Please do not raise new and different topics. There won't be enough time to do that and talk about the issues that are directly related and important to CalRTA. Next slide.
Thank you so much, Dave. I'm going to be covering some basic do's and don'ts of lobbying. And so many of you may be familiar with some of these, but it's always good to have a refresher course, especially since we're going into new meetings with some new members of Congress who were just elected recently. The first issue is be prepared. We can't stress this enough. If you haven't taken the time to understand what the issues are that we're covering, such as the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, if you were to be asked a general question, such as what is the WEP or what is the GPO, it might signal that the issue is not enough of an organizational priority. So it really is important to ensure that you're prepared to talk about the issues, that you're familiar, but also be honest. You might be asked a very technical question about one of the issues that you're going to be presenting. If you don't know the answer to the question, don't fudge it, because the worst thing you want to do is give an answer that's incorrect and then have someone follow up on that. Feel free to say, you know what, that's a really good question, Congress member. I don't have an answer, but let me write that information down, and I'm going to either follow up with you or I will have someone else follow up with you. And then it's very important for you to reach out to Susie, Dave, or myself so that we can ensure that we're following up with that Congress member's office. That helps to establish credibility. It's also a nice reminder for that office. And it shows that, that we do follow up and believe these issues are important. Be brief. As Dave was noting earlier, you might not have a lot of time in the meeting. You might find out right at the start of your meeting that your Congress member who you thought you were going to have for a half an hour might say, something just came up. I'm only going to be on for 5 minutes. What's going to be your elevator speech? What are you going to say in a very concise way that can help to convey the importance of the issues that we're advocating for, while also trying to integrate some brief short stories? So hopefully you won't have to be as concise and as brief, but be prepared to be brief if it turns out that the individual that you were meeting with winds up only being able to give you a few minutes of their time. Stay on message. Elected officials love to squirrel. They love to divert you into focusing on a new bill that they're carrying or something that they're personally really interested in regarding education. They might ask you, what do you think of these new school reopening plans? There are a lot of very interesting topics, but those are not the topics that we're focusing on for the meeting. So it's very important that as they or their staff may bring up something that's not related, try to bring it back and say, you know, that's a really important issue. It's not something that we're involved in right now. We, you know, if we need to follow up, we can have someone follow up with them. But we did want to convey the importance of eliminating some of these Social Security offsets. Don't overkill the issue as well. It's harder to do on Zoom and online, but if you're talking to someone, you can generally start to tell when their eyes are glazing over, if they start to pick up their phone and look around. Some of those subtle clues are harder to pick up on Zoom, but try to be very attentive. If it looks like you're losing the member of Congress or they already get it, they're sold on the issue, you don't have to keep beating the dead horse. If maybe the way you're conveying the message, by the looks of them, it might look like that's not as effective. Have someone else step in with their personal story, or we can move on to some of the other talking points that we have. Be respectful and polite. As Dave noted, sometimes somebody just has a bad day, and a number of members of Congress have had quite a few bad days lately. It's been very difficult and challenging, not just for everyone, but in Washington in particular. So there is a small possibility you might have a meeting where the representative is not overly enthusiastic, or it might be particularly grumpy. Always just keep that high ground, be very respectful and polite. If you have a situation where you need to respectfully agree to disagree, it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, you know, Congress member, I hear what you're saying. That's not what we believe on this issue. We're going to respectfully agree to disagree, but there are some other issues that we would like to share that we think that we can have some common ground on. Breathe. Most of these meetings are not going to be tense meetings. They're actually going to be very positive. They're going to be very diplomatic. It's easy sometimes to get anxious or feel overwhelmed or starstruck. If you feel like you're getting like that, take a breath. Don't be afraid to breathe, and also be very reliable. If something happens and you cannot make that meeting, it's very important to reach out to others in your area that were going to be participating in that meeting, or you can reach out to Susie, Dave, myself, Ron, Angelique, Jim, to let us know that you can't participate, and we will make sure that that meeting still takes place and that it's effective as possible. The last thing we want to do is have reach out, set up a meeting with a member of Congress's office, and then not make that meeting. Because if those same staff members are working in the office, they're not going to let us take a meeting for next year. Prior to the meeting, make sure that you all select who the spokesperson needs to be and assign your roles. Decide who is going to be doing the introductions, who is going to be covering each topic, who is going to be the timekeeper, and practice those roles so you're more effective during the meeting. As I noted earlier, don't be timid or awestruck. There are people too. And in your visit with a question, if you didn't ask during the presentation, would you commit to be a co-sponsor of HR 82? That's a very excellent question to ask them. If they say yes, make sure that whoever is the note keeper for that meeting, that they're writing that information down so Susie, Dave, and I can follow up with them. The leave something tangible is a little more tricky, so you don't necessarily need to worry about that, but your GRC lead is going to be sending information ahead of time to that member of Congress's office, so they'll be able to follow along with documents. Debrief after the meeting. You might consider setting up another Zoom call right after your meeting with a member of Congress for your group to come back and talk about the meeting. Talk about what went well, what didn't go well, what might you improve, what were the commitments that you were able to glean from that representative's office, and make sure you're jotting that information down so you can share with us so that we can make sure that we're following up with that office. And then finally, send a thank you letter. Many of you may have postcards around the house and CalRTA postcards. Feel free to send those out. If you can't do that, it's always better to send an email right now than an old-fashioned snail mail letter, and thank them for the time that they've taken to meet with our members.
Thank you, Jennifer. And as David and Jennifer, we said, we're going to keep repeating and repeating because it is important. This is a whole new learning tool for all of us. We were able to do about 10 virtual meetings this past summer with out-of-state representatives. And so we have the experience, we know what worked, and we're hoping that if you have any suggestions after yours, we'll always improve upon them. Remember during the meeting to always use complete vocabulary. If you start out with CalRTA, you're going to confuse them. The California Retired Teachers Association, referred to as CalRTA. The windfall elimination provision, referred to as the WEP. The government pension offset, referred to as the GPO. We always assume they know every piece of legislation, but as David said earlier, they're faced with hundreds on a daily basis. So it's important that we educate them as we're doing our ask. Keep the people on your group and the legislature on task. It's important that we end with a question, and they may ask you at the end if you support one of their bills. Instead of committing to supporting a bill from CalRTA, just be polite and say, I will take that back to our leadership and we will look at it. Most of the time it won't be in the platform, but there are times that they have been. Make it clear at the end of your meeting that you're saying, now, can we ask again, will you support by becoming a co-sponsor HR 82? Will you commit to making sure that that donut hole in Medicare is completely resubmitted as it was the commitment 4 years ago? So you want to end with your ask. What do you want that legislator or their staff to do? Jennifer noted a lot of our divisions, we were purchasing those postcards that we were mailing. Very effective. Now we just want to use those for some thank you, or you could distribute them, maybe drop off at some of your members. They were pre-stamped postcard, drop them off at your members' porches and ask them to start doing the postcards and thank yous also. This year, the debriefing is going to go to Jennifer Baker. We're trying to keep everything as organized and simplified as we can. And remember, make sure you document any questions that they have. The other thing is reminding you, there are 3 folders, file folders that we'll have on our website. One of them will just be for your GRC representatives. They're the only one that will be sending that to the elected official. So that will only be for them to have, and it won't be on the member page. But on the member page, all of the talking points and all the documents we referred to will be there. So you want to go over them. When we're doing our talking points, this is how we're assigning our speakers. What do we need under Social Security? What about the WEP GPO? We're also going to be referring to the Medicare and Medicaid needs and our full support of special education. As you know, the federal government mandated special education, 1977. They said they would, in 1990, promise to fund 40% of the special education cost. As of today, it's about 14%. That is a promise that has not been met. It is part of our platform for adequate public school funding. Jennifer.
Sorry, my computer started to freeze for a minute. So there are a number of documents that we are sending ahead, as we noted earlier. And so these are the documents that in the before times, when you would meet in person, they would all be included in a folder. And that would be the folder that you would be providing to the representative's office. So since we're not able to do that, what we did was put together, as you can see, a number of different documents, and we consolidated them into one file that is being sent ahead of time from your GRC lead. So they'll be able to have that about a week ahead of time and can review them. Chances are they might not have that opportunity until the day of, but nevertheless, they will have the items that we're going to be referring to, and we're calling them the send ahead documents. And I'm going to describe each of them here. I'm not going to go over all of the details in the next slides because you're going to be able to review those documents on our website, but we first are including general information about who CalRTA is, because most may not be familiar with the California Retired Teachers Association, and they'll be curious about who we are. We've also included the updated CalRTA state advocacy platform, which was just updated last month and finalized from the board. We've also included WEP and GPO myths and facts. And that's a very helpful resource that helps to dispel incorrect information that people often assume about the WEP GPO. We've also included a scenario chart regarding WEP GPO, which is a matrix. That's a very good resource for people that are very visual when they're processing information, that helps them to understand information. And then finally, the 2 additional documents are how Social Security penalties hurts teachers. This is information we've shared in the past. And the updated information that we've recently received regarding California pensionomics from the National Institute on Retirement Security. So you obviously know who CalRTA is, otherwise you wouldn't be on this call. So I'm not going to go over all the details, but this gives you an idea of some of the information that is going to be included on the handout. And again, this is information that we've referred to as some of the new updated materials that are going to be on the CalRTA website. And the next slide is the CalArts TA State Advocacy Platform that was just updated. So this is also on the website, and this is a very good resource also for you to be able to look at where our members are, as it was created from our survey. So this is also on our website, and this is going to be shared with our members of Congress in that Leave Ahead packet. And it covers our 4 platform areas. And then the next document is information on WebGPO. This is the myths and facts. Many of you might be familiar with this document. This is also going to be included. And then the next document is that scenario chart that I had mentioned earlier. Some people are able to process information a little better with a visual example. And this document is also a very helpful tool if someone were to ask the question, well, you didn't pay into Social Security, so why should you be able to receive why should we eliminate these offsets? And what this document clearly illustrates are a number of other individuals that did not pay into Social Security, but also are able to receive the full Social Security benefits. And so it's a helpful tool. And this is one of the documents that could be very helpful for you to get to know on our website. And then finally, we have additional information on WebGPO. This document is very helpful fiscally because we actually provide a breakdown of what the costs are for providing Social Security overall. And then if you look in that circle, you're going to see a very, very teeny tiny line of the actual cost of eliminating the WebGPO. This is a very good visual, helpful tool to show that the cost of eliminating the WebGPO and compared to the total size of providing Social Security is really de minimis. And then the second page of this document has personal stories from our members of how they're impacted by WebGPO. The final WebGPO document is how Social Security penalties hurt teachers. This is a very good resource that we have on our website. And this is also helpful for educating individuals generally about how the WEP and GPO impact our members. And then the last document in that send ahead packet is California Pensionomics. And some of you may be familiar with this, but if Pensionomics is a new term for you, what this is research that's put together by the National Institute on Retirement Security. And they do update this information every few years. They do a state-by-state breakdown on the economic impact that public employees have that have a defined benefit pension. They break down the economic impact that they have not only on that state, but on the nation as a whole. So we just got this updated information on California, and the cumulative impact from all of the individuals that have a public pension, a defined benefit pension, such as CalSTRS, such as CalPERS, is $36.3 billion. So for every dollar that's invested in a public employee pension, the return is $1.54. This is a very, very helpful tool, and this illustrates that you're all job creators. You are all a very integral part of the system keeping our economy moving and helping our economy to recover. So those are all the documents that are being set ahead of time to your members of Congress, and you'll be able to access those on the website.
Thank you, Jennifer. And now before we go through any questions, I'm going to stop the share, but I would only like the members that are going to do a role-playing activity with us to turn on their cameras. And I do want to stress again today, this is a role-playing. When we say Congressman Rittman, she's been appointed by the GRC. She's not truly, we wish Joyce was a congresswoman, but she's not. So if you could all turn off your cameras, except for the people who are, David, Joyce, Joanne, Marcia Lee, myself, and Jennifer. So this is how you would want to do a Zoom with your elected official. Now, as a guest who's just muted, it will be up to your lead to say cameras off or on, but we will do that. So we'll get started.
And don't forget to turn your camera on, Susie.
I'm telling everyone to do that. Thank you very much. All right,
You ready to go?
we're good.
Okay. Well, we wanted to say thank you so much, Congressmember Rittman, for taking the time to meet with us today. We know you have a very busy schedule. We're excited to share some information with your office today. First, we wanted to introduce ourselves. We're with the California Retired Teachers Association. Our members include certificated classroom employees, as well as individuals that were administrators or superintendents. Our members are throughout the state of California, and they're very enthusiastic in helping to ensure that retirees are well taken care of and prepared in their golden years. We wanted to share some information with you on a number of topics this morning. So each of our individuals here today are going to be covering some of our priorities that we would like to share information on. The first person that's going to share information with you this morning is our Government Relations Chair, Susie Dixon, who's going to provide some information on the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset.
Well, thank you all for coming today. I'm always very eager to hear the concerns of my constituents. And I'm envious of your sunshine back in California. That polar vortex has really turned DC into a freezer. But we didn't come to talk about the weather, so I'm eager to hear what you have to say.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And again, thank you for your time this morning. First of all, I do want to say we so appreciate that in the past, you have supported repeal of the government pension offset, the GPO, and the windfall elimination provision, the WEP. And we wanted to make you aware today, again, there is a new repeal bill, again, supported by Congressman Rodney Davis, HR 82, and we're trying to build that co-sponsor base again to get up to the number 290 so we can move to a vote. As you know, the GPO and the WEP were enacted in 1983 and 1977 with what seemed like good intentions. But as sometimes with any legislation, there are long-term effects that weren't looked at the beginning. The government pension offset is the one that is the most punitive for our members, because the majority of our members are female, and it's when they are losing their spousal death benefit. At this time, 74% of the women who are affected lose their 100% of their spousal death benefit. We sent ahead to your office some documents that show a scenario that there are people in the private sector who did not qualify for those 40 quarters or pay into Social Security, but are not penalized and receive their spousal benefit while the spouse is alive, and then the full benefit when they pass. And then the windfall elimination provision is the one that hurts our members who've had two careers, that they paid into Social Security, earned a 40 quarters, but because they may not have 30 years into a private sector, they also have a public pension. So they lose up to 50%. I myself am affected by both. I will lose over close to 50% when I collect Social Security, and I will lose my husband's full earned death benefit. Marcia Finney, one of our members, has a story to share, and this is a story that is common among our older members.
Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman Rittman. I wanted to mention I am a voting member of your district, and so I hope you'll see that this is close to home for all of us. My friend Vi, who's also a member of California Retired Teachers, she's in her late 80s, and for many years her husband was very ill. She was a teacher, but she started later in her career, and so her pension is small. Her husband's long illness drained their savings, and when he passed, she did not receive any of his Social Security benefits at all. This left her financially strapped and eventually put her at risk of losing her home. I'm sure you agree, this needs to be rectified.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is a story I hear often, and I totally agree with you that we've got to work on changing that. That's why I have always co-signed the WEP and GPO repeal bills.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcia. Now, Jennifer's going to speak on Social Security.
And thank you so much, Congresswoman, for your continued support of trying to protect educators from those Social Security offsets. In addition to the offsets, we also believe it's very important to ensure that Social Security itself is fiscally intact. It's been around for not yet 100 years, but we want to ensure that it continues to be successful and continues to thrive, so that our current and future generations are able to utilize its support. So we do ask that any threats that you might hear of that might threaten the fiscal integrity of Social Security are not moved forward. It's not something that we hear about all the time, but when we do, it's something we pay significant attention to, because that impacts the retirement security of not only our members, but obviously for Americans all over the country. And we would appreciate if you do hear about any kind of threats, feel free to reach out to us as a resource, and we'd be happy to collaborate with you on those issues.
Yep. Thank you. I would appreciate you being a resource. I know this issue is going to be up before us. Right now, we're dealing with some really critical issues, but very soon we are going to have to deal with Social Security. So I appreciate your backup.
Thank you very much.
And Marcia is going to speak on Medicare and Medicaid.
Well, thank you again, Congresswoman Brittman. I want to tell you a personal story. My father contracted ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and as you might know, that it's a terrible disease. He was ill for quite some time, and what really was so difficult, we had Medicare, but remember that Medicare has a donut hole, and prescription medications are so expensive, and when you run out of Medicare, you're stuck with this huge bill that drained my parents' savings. We want you to please consider the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, that had guaranteed that this donut hole would be closed. We'd like to see that happens. And then in general, that the price of medication needs to be controlled. The other is, now my father is passed and my mother has dementia. She's 92 years old. She needs home care. And as you know, this is exorbitantly expensive, and we need both Medicare and Medicaid to help us cover these expenses. I know you're tied up with meeting the expenses of COVID, but as you may know, that right now only 1% of our population is in long-term care, and yet 40% of people who have died from COVID are in these long-term care facilities. Please help us with both Medicare, Medicaid, and
thank you for reminding me about these important issues. I'm going to direct my legislative aide to pay particular attention to the issues you've raised. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have Joanne's going to speak on some funding for our public education.
Good afternoon. Thank you for speaking with us. I'm talking about full funding for the needs for special education students. The federal government has, in many cases over the years, and I have been a special education teacher for 26 years and spent 17 of those years going to the board meetings and listening in horror and embarrassed, because it always came up during budget analysis that special education encroaches upon the general ed fund. This is not a good feeling for either students of special education, the teachers of students of special education, or the general ed teachers and the budget. We really need to do something to help these students. We really do something to help the teachers in the classrooms. Right now, we have a mandate from the federal government to cut down on our special day classes for mild and moderate students. They are back in the general ed class. These students are struggling. The students in the gen ed class, the rest of the students are struggling because there's not enough help. One aide for 4 classes is not going to help those students. And the money has been promised by the federal government, but it doesn't come. We get a small amount. On the original bill, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act from 1977, and then when it was redone again in 1990, promised us at least 40% of the budget needed for students of special needs, and yet we've only gotten 14%. This is a very, very terrible issue for our young students. Having spent time in the classroom with them, knowing what they need, and they have the right to be treated just like any other student, yet they need certain things to help them attain what they're capable of attaining. So I really would appreciate if you would consider the legislation on that. Thank you.
I understand your concerns, but right now our country is facing a huge issue with education. There seems to be a stalemate. The president has said that children being out of school is a national emergency, and yet teachers seem to be balking at going back into the classroom. I'm wondering if your organization has any position on whether or not schools should be reopening.
I think that those decisions need to be made by the experts in the virus department. They are concerned for their own health, but they want to do what's right for children. And it seems to be kind of scattered at the moment. There isn't a general point of whether the students should be there or not. So they're doing what they feel is right. They're doing what their union feels is right, and they're doing what their school district feels is right. It is a dilemma because there's so many people so many school districts doing it in so many different ways. It is a problem. I agree.
I appreciate your insight. Does CalRTA as an organization have a position on this?
David, would you take that one?
Representative Redmond, no, CalRTA does not have a direct position on this. We believe that it is most appropriate to let the school districts, the educators, the staff of those school districts, and the parents to decide what is best for them. A one-size-fits-all probably is not a policy that would help.
Right.
So we have wanted to support the teachers, the parents, the staff, and others in reaching the conclusion. And quite frankly, it would be very helpful if the federal government was able to provide enough vaccines for every teacher, every person in the country to receive a vaccination, be it 1 shot or 2 shots, depending upon the vaccine, in order to make it safer for them to return to the classroom.
Yeah, thank you. You've raised some very interesting points that we can be using in our debate.
Thank you, David. And then our last speaker is Lee. He's going to talk about the benefits of pensions, public pensions.
Good morning, Congresswoman Rittman, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us this morning. And I've got to say, you are a much more sympathetic individual than that clown we spoke with yesterday. We appreciate that. So in your packet, you received a couple of sheets detailing the numbers I'm about to run through for you here. So there's a bit here, but I'll try to make it as brief as I can. The long and short of it is the vast majority of dollars distributed in pensions goes right back into the economy. And that's particularly true of pensions for retired educators. Most retired educators are collecting pensions of about $37,000 or less, which is pretty much the range that Social Security payouts fall in. And also due to the windfall elimination provision and the government pension offset, their ability to augment their small pensions with any income they might have earned or any benefits they might have earned while working in Social Security employment is grossly impaired, which makes it more difficult for them in retirement. In 2018, consumer spending in California based on public service employee pensions supported 395,000 jobs that paid nearly 25.5 billion in wages and salaries, more than 76 billion in total economic activity, and more than 15 billion in federal, state, and local taxes. The point here is that retired educator pensions are a significant driver of economic growth in both California and the nation as a whole. Specifically, in California, each $1 paid out in public service employee pensions generated more than $1.50 in economic activity. And even more impressively, every dollar invested by California taxpayers in public service employee pensions generated approximately $6.40 in economic activity within the state of California. That's a very impressive payback on the investment of our taxpayers. Another way of looking at the value these pension dollars deliver to the state is by looking at employment figures. In 2018, the state unemployment rate was 4.3%. Without retired educator pension spending, that number would have been 6.6%. As noted above, that spending supported nearly 400,000 jobs in the state. A further point is CalSTRS pension. The CalSTRS pension system is funded with many fewer tax dollars than you might imagine. Between 1993 and 2018, CalSTRS pension funding was based 23.9% on employer contributions. That's the taxpayer's contribution. And remember that teachers, both retired and working, are also taxpayers. 11.6% from employee contributions, and then nearly 65% from investment earnings. So less than a quarter of CalSTRS funding comes out of tax revenues. So we hope you'll agree with us that public service employee pensions are a great deal for California, and through their service to the state and its population, California retired teachers certainly deserve that pension.
Well, that certainly is a lot of information and statistics. I will promise you that I will look into that and study it. I appreciate your everything you've told me.
Well, thank you. And those numbers are all laid out in the 2 pages that are included in that package we sent you.
I remember seeing that. I did not have time to study it, unfortunately, but my legislative aide is working with that packet.
Good. And you can always follow up with us with questions if you have any.
Thank you. And David, would you like to close the meeting?
Thank you. And thank you, Representative Redmond. You've been very gracious with your time. We very much appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I want to summarize that we want to thank you for your co-sponsorship of the new WEP GPO repeal, HR 82. We want you and ask you to vote no on any effort to change the pre-existing conditions and donut hole closure that is in the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, but also vote yes on moving towards Social Security solvency and full funding for Social Security. Lastly, we hope and ask you to vote yes on any appropriation, either from the President Biden's budget and proposals on special education, or in separate legislation, such as Representative Huffman's legislation of last year, to provide funding to meet the commitment the federal government made for special education.
Okay, bye.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions for us that we may answer for you?
No, I don't at this time. I promise that I will give serious consideration to the issues that you've raised. Other than that, I don't want to make promises I may not be able to keep, but I will keep in mind everything you've said. And again, I really value the input of my constituents, especially an organization like the Retired Teachers. So thank you very much for coming to my office today and sharing all this information.
And thank you, Congresswoman. And could we, would you be oblige us with a screenshot that we could take?
Oh, certainly, certainly. And be sure to send me a copy.